Welcome back to Elseworlds, the best comic book related show in the multiverse, and today we're going to be talking about Spider-Man movies. Now, I was going to make my own Spider-Man Far From Home movie review, put it on the channel, but completely forgot. I saw the movie, and I will give my thoughts about it later, but just think of that as my Spider-Man Far From Home review when I get to it in this video. But for right now, we're going to talk about all the Spider-Man movies, starting from the Sam Raimi trilogy up until now. What's the worst? What's the best? Well, let's find out. We're going to start with the absolute worst, and that is, to me, and this should come as no surprise, the worst for me is Spider-Man 3. Spider-Man 3, yeah, there's a reason why most people hate this movie. It throws everything at the wall trying to make it stick, and it doesn't work. Which reminds me of another movie we'll get to later down the line. But for right now, Spider-Man 3. When I saw this movie, I was already tired of these actors. Tobey Maguire never quite worked for me as Spider-Man. I never hated him, but here, he feels like he's not trying. He feels like he's just there. Same with James Franco as Harry Osborn. Jeez, almost forgot there. And I still cannot stand Mary Jane in these movies. She is the most unlikable character, and there's so much focus on her side of things. And in this one, she has the most unlikable story arc, period. Throughout the whole movie, she is just the most whiny, most selfish character I've ever seen in a comic book movie. Like, even more than Tony Stark in Iron Man 3. Like, she is that unlikable. Then you got the villains, who just aren't interesting. You got New Goblin with Harry Osborn. Whatever. He's there for 5 minutes. You got Sandman, who is the best thing about this movie. Whenever Sandman is on screen, whether he's Flint Marko or he's kicking ass as Sandman, he is the best part. He's the best actor. There's this great scene where he first becomes Sandman. He's rising out of this sand pit, reforming his body. That scene alone, you could have made that a short film. Just that part, the Sandman. Right there, Oscar. Amazing special effects, great acting from Thomas Hayden Church. Yeah, every time Sandman's on screen, I love it. But it's a shame is that they just ditch him and decide to go for this new villain, Venom. Oh boy, Venom. First of all, you got Topher Grace. Yeah, totally. I totally see. No, I can't even finish that joke. No, who thought Topher Grace would be a good Eddie Brock? I could not stand this version of Venom, and thank God it got replaced by a much better version. He's there for 5 minutes, he dies, and the movie ends on this very bittersweet note. Not even bittersweet, he's just bitter. It's like, that's how it ends? What? Okay, yeah, okay. And yeah, from beginning to end, I did not like this movie. Whenever it's Sandman, it's awesome, but everything else is just so blech. Yeah, not a fan. This next one might surprise you, but my next pick is Spider-Man 1 from the Sam Raimi trilogy. I enjoyed this movie when I was a kid, but the more I watched it growing up, I did not like this movie. Even when I was a kid, there were things about that I thought were just weird. Like, one, I said that Tobey Maguire, for me, he's a weird version of Spider-Man. There's times where he's genuinely awesome, but for the most part, he just feels awkward, but not in the charming way like how Peter Parker's supposed to be. He's just awkward. Like, you just kind of cringe sometimes at some scenes. Not blaming him. Tobey Maguire is a great actor. If you've never seen the movie Brothers with him and Jay Gyllenhaal, go see that shit. He's a great actor, but just for some reason, he never quite fit as Spider-Man. I think that's due to the writing. I think some of the choices they made for Spider-Man's design, like the raised webbing on his suit, is weird. I don't like the organic webbing. I don't care how you defend it. I do not like it. Never have. Even when I first saw the movie as a kid, never liked that. You got Willem Dafoe, who is entertaining to watch, I won't deny, but that suit, ugh, God, I hate the Green Goblin suit. It looks like a Power Rangers villain. The only thing that makes up for it is Willem Dafoe's acting. When he's cackling, having fun, it's fun to watch. But then you look at his design, it's just like, who approved this? The gaping open mouth thing, that is just so dumb to me. You have that scene where he's crawling across the floor like a cat toward his Halloween mask on a chair, and I die laughing. I don't know if that was intentional for you to laugh, but it kills me every time. Danny Elfman's score is amazing. I don't deny that. In fact, it's still probably the best score for Spider-Man I've ever seen. Although, one kind of does come close. But we'll see. We'll talk about that later. You got Harry. You got Mary Jane, who I don't care about. Uncle Ben and Aunt May, they're like one of the shining beacons in this franchise. I really enjoy them, even though they don't get much role, especially Uncle Ben for obvious reasons. But like, Aunt May, I really like her portrayal. I really liked Uncle Ben, and they are kind of the most iconic portrayals of these characters so far in live action. Most of the action scenes are entertaining enough, but there's some bad CGI in this one. Something that Spider-Man 3 gets right is that the CGI is amazing in every fight scene. Here, you can definitely tell this is when they were first trying out big superhero fights, and there's some that still hold up. Like, I'll admit the whole fight scene at the end in that broken house, that looks cool. But, like, when he's in that parade jumping across balloons, it looks like a video game. I'll just say this. It looks bad. But in the end, Spider-Man 1 is a mixed opinion thing for me. There's a lot of things I like and there's a lot of things I don't. But in the end, I still just kind of consider it meh. It's not bad. It's just kind of like, whatever. And that's why it's number 7 on my list. And number 6 is a movie that just is baffling to me. And that is The Amazing Spider-Man 2. This is a movie I was very excited by. Kind of spoiling something for later in the list, but I really enjoyed The Amazing Spider-Man. So I was really excited to see what they would do with a sequel. Especially with Electro, who's one of my favorite Spider-Man villains. I still have no idea how to feel about this movie. Because there's so many moments where it's like, that is cool, that is amazing. And then there's times where it's like, that is weird, that's stupid, that's idiotic. And it just goes back and forth between it so much that it's just like, I don't know if I like this movie or not. It is the perfect mixed bag, is what I always call it, the perfect mixed bag. And that's why it's kind of right here in the middle between the movies that I don't like and the movies that I do like. It's right there in the middle. So let's go over my positives real quick. Still enjoy Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. I think he has a lot of fun with the character. I love his suit. I love the design of his web shooters. I love his spider sense, the way how it's done. This movie reminds me a lot of the first Spider-Man movie with Sam Raimi, how he does spider sense. But I think it's just done to a freaking extreme in this one. I actually enjoy Electro, despite what a lot of people say. I will admit, Max Dillon, that part of his performance, we could just chuck that out. But Electro, when he's blue, when he's got his powers, I think he's awesome. Jamie Foxx nails it. There's some weird CGI in the end, but we'll talk about that later. Of course, you got to talk about the romance between Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker. It's very well done. They were a cute couple. Probably the best comic book couple ever in live action. And when he's Harry Osborn, just straight up regular Harry Osborn, I actually did really like Dane DeHaan's version of Harry Osborn. It was weird. Again, going back to my mixed angle, we'll talk about that later. For the most part, there's a lot of things about this I did enjoy, especially the way the movie looks. The movie looks beautiful. And then you have, by far, my favorite thing about this movie. This is the part of the movie that I consider 100% amazing, and that is the soundtrack. The soundtrack by Hans Zimmer and the Magnificent Six, I believe is what they're called. Go look this up on YouTube. It is amazing to listen to. It is so unique that I just love it. I'll specifically talk about 2 tracks. I'm Spider-Man and My Enemy. These 2 tracks alone make the soundtrack amazing. But you do have problems. You have Rhino, who's played by one of my favorite actors of all time. Could have been amazing, but he's there for 5 minutes. Kind of neat, but he's there for literally less than 5 minutes. Probably only like 3. You have Green Goblin, who was spoiled on the poster. Yeah, there for 5 minutes. Again, you have Electro, who's awesome, but he's kind of underutilized because he's only in the movie for like 30 minutes. Then he goes away for the next act, and then comes back at the very end, causes some shit, and then he is killed off. Spoilers, sorry about that, but yeah, he gets killed off, and that's annoying to me. And he's got some really weird, wonky CGI in the final fight. It's like they made that last second. I don't know what was the issue, but yeah, the CGI looks weird in that part. You have the big spoiler that happened. In the trailer, they showed that Gwen Stacy dies. Why you showed that in the trailer, I will never know. But yeah, that happens, and while it's kind of effective in the movie, I do feel sad for Peter Parker. I really wish that the trailers did not spoil that for me. I guess that's more of a fault on Sony's behalf. But there's other faults. This movie is so jam-packed, and this is one of the reasons why it's so mixed, because they mix so many stories that could have worked as their own individual movies, but they set up so much stuff that it becomes actually hard to follow. Some work, some don't, and it's just like, ugh. And that's why this movie is right here in the middle. I have no idea how to feel about this movie. There's times where it's good, and there's times where it's bad. Maybe in the future, I'll finally come up with a reason why I genuinely love it or I genuinely hate it, but right now, it's just right here in the middle. And then at number 5, you have the movie that most people consider number 1, but I don't. But that's not to say that's bad, and that is Spider-Man 2. Sam Raimi's movie. This was the best of the Sam Raimi trilogy because it felt like all the different things worked. I actually really liked Tobey Maguire pretty much throughout the whole movie, except for one part of the movie where it becomes kind of like a sitcom, but we'll talk about that later. I really enjoyed the struggle he had with Harry Osborn, James Franco acting his ass off. Um, I was least annoyed by Mary Jane in this one. I still think she's a horrible character. Then you have the villain, Doc Ock, played by freaking Alfred Molina. This dude is perfect. I loved every single thing about this version of Doc Ock. From the way the arms are designed, I love his trench coat look, the sunglasses. It just looks badass. He acts badass. It's a shame we only got to see him for one movie, and this was kind of like my main problem throughout the whole entirety of Sam Raimi's. They just kept killing off the villains. Like, why? One of the reasons why shows like Batman the Animated Series and Spider-Man the Animated Series work is that they don't kill off the villains. You can always bring them back for future sequels. Make more money. They could become iconic for the franchise, you know. Anyway, that's a rant for another time. But Alfred Molina, he nails it. The action scenes are still on point. There are some amazing action sequences. That train sequence alone makes this movie. Danny Elfman, on point. I love this movie. I want to say my favorite scene in the whole movie is actually a scene with Doc Ock. It's the scene in the hospital where he first wakes up after his big accident. If you're a fan of Evil Dead like I am, you know why I love that scene. That was like, okay, Sam Raimi finally got to go off his rails and do whatever that he wanted. That was so much fun to watch. You can just tell, okay, you're embracing Evil Dead a little bit. But I do have my flaws with this movie, and that is some of the comedy doesn't work. There's some that are amazing. Like when he's talking to the dude in the elevator, that scene cracks me up. But then you got this whole sequence where he's without his powers and he's trying to live life. It is so corny and cheesy that it does not fit. Even for Spider-Man, it just feels like it belongs in a completely different movie. Especially when it ends on a freeze frame like a sitcom. It's like, who was in charge of this scene? And on a more mixed angle, I've never known how to feel about the scene after the train. Well, it's actually during the train sequence, but where everyone picks up Spider-Man like he's Jesus, and they all say, "We won't tell anybody." Yeah, you're gonna vouch for everybody on that train? Okay, yeah. That's a bit of a nitpick, I'm aware, but to me that one always just felt weird. And let's talk about the extras in the movie. This is one that I agree with Nostalgia Critic on. All the extras in these movies are so weird and cheesy. Like, there are some that are just straight up over the top because their faces are, like, right in the camera, so they overact as much as they can. I don't know why Sam Raimi chose to focus on these people so much, but it was just a weird thing. Other than that, I really enjoy Spider-Man 2. It's not the best, as many people always try to claim to me. I see why they love it, I really do, but compared to some movies on this list, I gotta put it right below them. And then you get to what's probably going to be the most controversial on this list, and that is The Amazing Spider-Man. Now, this movie doesn't really get as much hate as Amazing Spider-Man 2, but there are going to be people that are going to consider me a traitor for putting this above Spider-Man 2. And yeah, I'm sorry, I love this movie. I really do. When I saw this back in 2012, I was kind of in awe how much I loved it. It's very different. That's what I like. There's no other superhero movie like it. There's a unique tone to it. There's a unique style to it. Despite it being another origin story for Spider-Man, which is kind of one of my only negatives about the movie. It's like, okay, we've kind of seen this before. But the way how they do Spider-Man's origin, it felt different than the usual portrayal. I liked seeing this more inquisitive side of Peter Parker. How he's just willing to break into government facilities to figure out this mystery. And that's the other thing I like. I like the mystery angle of what happened with his parents. That's something they don't really delve into much, is his parents. And I kind of like that angle. It isn't done 100% perfectly, but I did enjoy it. And at this time, it was more refreshing to see a high schooler version of Peter Parker. In Sam Raimi's trilogy, he was already graduating high school. Here, we got to see him mostly in high school. And it was a lot of fun to watch, especially his interactions with some of the other students like Flash Thompson and Gwen Stacy. It was a lot of fun to see. And I know some people have complaints about Andrew Garfield being too good looking to be a geek. Well, here's the thing, modern day geeks are not like how they were back in the 60s. They aren't all these suspender wearing giant glasses geeks that like you'd see in Big Bang Theory. No. Some of them are just loners. He's literally just a loner who likes skateboarding and happens to love science. And I find that to be more of a realistic angle when it comes to Spider-Man. I don't know why, I just enjoy that angle, but I could see why some people have problems with it. I really enjoyed. I always forget the dude's name, but he does a great job as the Lizard and Kurt Connors. I thought he was a really well done villain, considering he was more like a Jekyll and Hyde situation, which is kind of like what they've been doing a lot in Spider movies at that time. But for some reason, for me, it worked. And I know there's a weird thing people saying the CGI was awful. I thought it worked. I don't know. I don't know what you really expected. He's a giant lizard. I don't know. You have the suit, which I really love. I don't really get people's problems with this suit. I like the golden lenses. I like that it looks unique. Like, oh yeah, I see that. That is Garfield's Spider-Man suit. Same with the Amazing Spider-Man 2. I really enjoyed that suit, even though it feels like straight out of Ultimate Comics. But here, I just think this has a really unique style to it that it looks like something that a person would build out of a bunch of spandex. So, yeah, I dig it. The music was really well done. And there's some great scenes in this movie. Like, the scene with the cranes, I know some people had problems with it, but I really liked the angle of seeing all these heroes working with Spider-Man. And I like that one of them happens to be a person that he saved earlier in the movie, showing that good deeds come back around, you know? I really enjoyed it, and it really got me this, like, pumped up feeling. Like, when he's swinging, especially some of those angles, Mark Webb does a great job filming the swinging in these movies. And there's some badass action sequences with the lizard. Like, when he fights him, it's honestly kind of astonishing, like, how much hate this movie sometimes gets. Like, I get that there's a lot of repeats of the Sam Raimi movies, but really, what did you expect from Spider-Man? Something completely brand new? I mean, even newer movies like Homecoming repeat stuff from those movies, so I feel like it's kind of a weird criticism people have. And yeah, still to this day, I have no idea why people don't like this movie as much. I will go on to say it's probably my favorite origin story of Spider-Man to date, when it comes to movies anyway. There are things about The Amazing Spider-Man I like more than Tobey Maguire. Hell, there's even things about it that I like even more than Tom Holland. And while there are aspects about Andrew Garfield that I like more than Tom Holland, it's obviously for my next two choice through process of elimination who I like more. And let's get right to that. At number 3, we have the newest one, Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, I'm going to try and make this as brief as possible. It's pretty much a review of this movie that says it just came out. Here's how I'm going to view it. When I first saw this movie, I was a little nervous because when it starts, it's kind of not as good as Homecoming. For like the first maybe 30 minutes to 45 minutes of the movie, it feels just like a repeat of Homecoming with very similar jokes, and most of them didn't really land for me. Some of the characters were just straight up annoying, like this one kid who did not go away in the snap, and now he's like 15 or something like that. That to me was weird. He was a weird character. The teacher is annoying. Like, this one teacher character, I find him to be just irritating. Still not a fan of Flash Thompson. However, the more the movie goes on, like, I grow to really like Zendaya as Michelle Jones, I believe is her name. I didn't like her in the first movie. I thought she was weird, but she really grew on me in this one. She has a really cute chemistry with Tom Holland. I still love Ned. Ned is an awesome sidekick character. And, of course, you got Tom Holland, who's amazing. And, well, I wouldn't say the movie's bad. Like, when the movie first starts, it's just kind of okay. It's like, okay, where are you going from here? But the moment you get to, like, Prague and stuff like that, that's when the movie becomes amazing. No pun intended. There is some great action sequences. Jake Gyllenhaal comes in as Mysterio. He is by far the best thing about this movie. I loved his portrayal of Mysterio. I had been waiting for Mysterio for so long, and it was so satisfying to see how they portray him. There is a sequence in this movie that feels straight out of the comics. That's pretty much like, well, I'll talk about it later in a bit. But yeah, there's a sequence in him. It's probably by far my favorite scene in this movie. If you've seen the movie, you probably know what it is if you're a Mysterio fan. And yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal, perfect. Everything about him was perfect in my opinion, except for one thing which I can't talk about because it's spoilers. But yeah, wasn't a fan of that. But it was literally like one minuscule thing that kind of bothered me. But yeah, other than that, loved it. And from like the halfway point to the end of this movie, there is some Spider-Man stuff that just feels like straight out of Spider-Man PS4. I honestly think Sony was looking at Insomniac and going, "Hey, can we borrow that for a second? Thank you." Yeah. When Spider-Man gets a certain suit on, you've seen it from the trailers, but once he gets that suit on, I was just in awe. That's when the movie ramps up for me. Up until that point, it was like, okay, this is good, but now this is when the movie is just great. The last half of this movie saves this movie for me, and it was almost everything I wanted from this kind of movie. And then it has these two post-credit scenes. One was just really cool, it was awesome. But then there's this one. Holy crap! I don't know what they're gonna do for the next one, but I'll just say this: I am freaking hyped, and that's why it's at number 3. Next at number 2 is the other Tom Holland Spider-Man movie, and that is Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, here's my interesting history with this movie. When this movie was first being marketed, when the first teaser and the first trailer came out, I thought this movie looked awful. I thought this movie was going to be terrible. Just complete mess. Give me another amazing Spider-Man 2 or Spider-Man 3 situation. But much to my surprise, when it came out, I was blown away. From beginning to end, I loved everything about this movie. From the comedy to the action sequences to the character development of Peter Parker to the suits. I loved everything about this movie. When I watched this movie, it gave me major flashbacks to the Spectacular Spider-Man, which I used to watch as a kid. Tom Holland really emulates that version of Peter Parker, in my opinion. He's funny, he's likable, he has flaws, which, is part of his character. He's not a perfect human being. He has lessons he needs to learn, which he does. There's a great character arc in here, how he needs to learn how to stop relying on other people. He has to rely on himself, which is kind of something they repeat in Far From Home, but not really. It's kind of a different moral there in a way. But anyway, here I really like what they did with it. You have Michael Keaton as the Vulture, who is by far the best Spider-Man live-action villain thus far. I was always excited for Vulture, but I had no idea they were going to go with this angle where he is possibly the most likable villain of the entire Spider-Man franchise. I totally get where he's coming from. I mean, what he's doing is bad, but at least, you know what? I kind of see where you're coming from. Which is, in my opinion, always the best thing to do with a villain. When you take a villain and you humanize them enough so that you don't root for them, but you kind of like, man, if you had just used your gifts for something else, you could have been a great guy. But just a damn shame. My only slight complaint I have with this movie is not really even a complaint anymore, but I didn't really know what to think of Zendaya as MJ. I like I said, I don't like Flash Thompson in these movies. And my other little complaint is the music. While I think the music definitely improved in Far From Home, here I think Michael Giacchino's main theme was good, but everything else just kind of felt meh. Other than that, this was my favorite Spider-Man movie for a long time. It blew every other Spider-Man movie out of the water until my number 1. And we're going to talk about that right now. And number 1 is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Holy shit. I love this movie. I don't care if I get demonetized for that. I loved every single frame of this movie. How's the cast? They're awesome. How's the animation? It's perfect in every way. How's the story? Perfect. Everything about this movie is perfect, in my opinion. I didn't have a single flaw. The characters were fun and interesting. I really loved Jake Johnson's version of Peter Parker, this older, more broken Spider-Man who has to teach this new Spider-Man how to use his powers. I thought that was a really fun angle to work with. I really loved Nicolas Cage as Spider-Noir, Haley Steinfeld as Gwen Stacy. All these different Spider people just worked. And I forget the dude who plays Miles, but he did Miles so well, it was actually kind of mind-blowing. There's some great humor. There's a lot of heart. There's a lot of mature moments, too. That's what I like. This movie it reminded me of a lot of movies I used to watch as a kid, like The Iron Giant, where, yeah, it's for family, it's for kids, but it isn't afraid to have some bite to it. There's some dark moments, there's a lot of mature moments, there's even some sad moments that I like that. I like that a movie doesn't have to talk down to kids. It doesn't have to all be sunshine, lollipops, and Pringles. Stuff like that. Like, I never like it when a movie talks down to kids. I like when it takes them more seriously. But there's plenty of humor for them to enjoy. Like, I love this one scene where Spider-Man throws a bagel at somebody, and literally onomatopoeia above their head says, bagel. And that just killed me. And that's the other thing. This movie feels like a comic book. The 2.5D animation style they go with feels straight out of a comic book. Like, through the whole movie, I feel like I should be seeing word bubbles. And there are word bubbles that pop up here and there, but the whole thing just feels like a comic book brought to life. And that's why I love this movie. It embraces everything I love about live-action Spider-Man movies, animated TV shows that I used to watch as a kid, and merges it together. I loved it. I will go over... Not only will I go as far as to say this is one of my favorite comic book movies ever made, but it's also one of my favorite movies ever made. That's how much I love this movie. And that is why it is at my number 1. I hear they're doing a sequel to it. Hopefully, they don't mess it up. Hopefully, maybe even be better than the first one. Who knows? With that said, what did you think of Spider-Man movies? My list is probably going to irritate some of you, but maybe you'll agree, maybe you'll disagree. Who knows? Post your comments down below. Like this video if you did, subscribe for more episodes, and I will see you all next time in the multiverse.